We have Jeff Mendelsohn, the executive director of Pro-Israel America, now joining us in the studio to further discuss this. So, you know, we've been seeing this, we've been covering it. The U.S. has received lots of backlash from around the world over its handling of the withdrawal of American troops from the country. What will this so-called tarnishing of the U.S.'s reputation on this issue mean for Israel?
Well, Tasha, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today. Look, the takeover by the Taliban in Afghanistan and Kabul is deeply troubling, first and foremost to the people of Afghanistan, and particularly to women and girls in that country. And we're all obviously very concerned about that. But it has implications for Israel and this region. If you look at the picture, the Taliban takeover has emboldened Iran and its proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas. Iran seeking nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, a threat to Israel, a threat to the United States, a threat to American allies in the region. And I think the events in Afghanistan reinforce the importance of Israel as a stabilizing force in this region. Israel is the country that stands as a bulwark against Iranian aggression, against extremism, against radicalism. And at the heart of that is the U.S.-Israel relationship.
Right. So could this actually, and you seem to be essentially saying this, but could this actually end up favoring Israel in a sense by emphasizing the U.S.'s reliance on Israel as its strongest strategic ally in the region?
Well, I don't know if I'd say favor, but I think that it reinforces the critical role that Israel plays in the strategic posture of the region to the United States and to American allies in the region. And so, yes, I think that if you look at, for example, Israel's always had the doctrine of being able to defend itself by itself. I think that is more important than ever. And it's actually one of the strategic pillars of the U.S. security relationship with Israel. And the other factor is the Abraham Accords, right? We're about to celebrate the one-year anniversary of the Abraham Accords. Very historic relationship, right? The events in Afghanistan can accelerate that process, right? They can, as Sunni Arab countries, particularly those allied with the United States, are looking at the picture,
right.
They will see, hopefully, Israel more as an ally than as an enemy. And the historic breakthrough that we had last year should continue and expand.
So, and again, you're already answering the next question that I had for you, but I'd like to kind of dive into that a little bit deeper. You know, how will this fallout from Afghanistan really reposition Iran in the region, and as a result, influence how Israel's going to forge ties with other Gulf Arab nations? What other states, per se, will become closer to Israel as a result of what we're seeing take place now?
I can't predict which states will do that, but obviously everyone's talking about Saudi Arabia. And it's the principal Sunni Arab state in the Arabian Peninsula, and so I think there will be serious discussions within Saudi Arabia, between Israel and Saudi Arabia and the United States and others about what this means for the next chapter of the Abraham Accords. And all of this is possible because of the strength of the U.S.-Israel relationship. And without the U.S.-Israel relationship, Israel wouldn't be able to defend itself by itself the way it can today. Right. And you wouldn't have the Abraham Accords the way you have them today. And so the stronger the U.S.-Israel relationship is, the more that you have Israel as a force of stability and a force against radicalism in this region. And I think that creates the opportunities for peace, right? And I think that as time goes on, there's obviously, the events are very fluid now in Afghanistan, and that's going to play itself out over the next weeks, maybe months. But I think as things settle, Israel and its role in the region will remain paramount, both to the United States and to others in the region.
So we see, you know, we've been discussing the geopolitical benefits, you could say, for Israel as a result of what is taking place in Afghanistan. But what should Israel and the United States at this point be doing to help Afghani refugees and the public as a whole?
Well, that's a very complicated situation, and there's a lot of debate now in the United States about exactly how they're going to go about doing that. But I think that from the perspective of Pro-Israel America and those that are members are members across the country. We're very focused on strengthening the U.S.-Israel relationship and making sure that Israel has the capacity to play this important role in the region. And that is why we think it's so important to elect members of Congress who also value that relationship and fight against those who seek to undermine that relationship.